Hello, I'm Ben Orchard.
And I'm Claire Fitzpatrick.
Welcome to Sword, Sorcery and Synthesizers, the 80s fantasy movie podcast. I'm coming to you from Adelaide.
And I'm in Brisbane.
But through the wonders of modern technology and the magic of Skype, we meet each week to discuss some beloved movie of a bygone era and see what lies behind the nostalgia. I was just going to say, during the episode that we did on Labyrinth, you mentioned The Lost Boys, sort of teen biker gang movie. Teen biker gang who happen to be vampires.
Yeah, the best.
Yeah, you mentioned that was a favorite of yours. I said we should do a podcast episode on it. So here we are. But anyway, you know more about this film than I do. This is not one of those cases like Labyrinth or Never-Ending Story or The Dark Crystal where it's, such a deeply ingrained part of my childhood, but it's something you've only discovered recently. It's kind of the reverse. I'm sort of the newbie when it comes to this.
Okay, so I wouldn't say I'm not so well versed in it as you are with other things. However, it is something that I've revisited time and time and time again. It is a movie that I might actually watch a couple of times a year because it's something that it has the nostalgic part of it, but also I just think it's a really fun movie. I think it has so many different aspects of it, which is what I love in a movie. So yeah, I'm really excited to just kind of chat about what I like about it, what you like about it, and just sort of, talk about how exciting it is and how exciting it still is watching it like so many years, like into the future, I guess.
Well, what is the main source of appeal for you about this film?
It's the idea that, so it's like, the vampire, thing. I love vampire mythology. I love vampire lore. I'm like a massive Anne Rice fan. But this is like a really fun kind of vampire thing. It's not serious. It doesn't take itself too seriously. But it's a combination of like the youthfulness, the music, the growing up kind of thing, the dark, shadowy areas, the cool sidewalk, the cool beach place where, I don't know, all these murderers, murder capital. It seems like a really fun place to be. And I think when I was younger watching up, I thought about like, oh my God, why do I live in such a boring place? Why am I stuck in this boring place? And I would watch The Lost Boys again and again and again and think, oh my God, this is so fun. Imagine being able to just go out on the Ferris wheel at night, every single night. Imagine going out for like walks along the boardwalk, listen to cool people play the saxophone, watch shirtless men walk around, see a cool gang of like ruffians who, oh my God, they're vampires. I don't know. I just think it's a really fun movie. Yeah.
Well, watching it again, I was struck by the sort of melting pot of different elements to this story. I mean, I recall the advertising slogan, the tagline that's on the front of the DVD box, where it says, sleep all day, party all night, never grow old, never die, it's fun to be a vampire. And there's this, you could see Lost Boys as part of a trend. I mean, you mentioned Anne Rice, and it's sort of moving along to sort of Twilight in the 21st century, this sort of glamorization of vampires, the way they evolved to develop a sort of romantic appeal. I guess the difference with the Lost Boys is that although they're portrayed as attractive and they have a certain charisma, a sense of humor, they retain a sort of bad boy edge that is sort of, smoothed over in a lot of later, more romantic works like Twilight. They are still amoral killers. And like their lifestyle is one of completely crazy hedonism crazy risk taking.
Hmm.
There's this balance of like horror and comedy to the film,
Hmm.
in the sense that like there's some one-liners tossed around. There's some memorable sort of action set pieces, but you never forget that the characters are in real danger.
I think also, like, one of the things that it brings you back to it actually in danger is, like, how Michael is kind of drawn into this whole kind of motorcycle gang. Before he knows that they're vampires, he thinks of them as, like, a gang. And they get him to do all these kinds of tests of, what was described as like tests of courage, feats of strength.
I guess you could consider it like a lot of secret societies have initiation rituals, these sort of hazing rituals, and it's sort of like a rite of passage.
Yeah,
and a lot of the film that I think is relatable is it takes these situations of very typical adolescent rites of passage and peer pressure and takes them to sort of supernatural extreme.
Yeah. And like obviously, they have their hideout. Their kind of gang is the, sunken hotel, which is what is that? The earthquake, which is the early 1900s. I can't remember exactly what year it was that it said that the earthquake was. But like
now it's sort of this cave that you enter.
Yeah.
And when the vampires are asleep, they hang upside down like bats. I thought that was a nice visual touch. To represent their lair as like when they're not out and about in society, they revert to this sort of animalistic state, like bats, and they're hanging upside down in a cave.
And I think it's really cool because it's like, that they're in the cave. They're in something that used to be quite, I'm assuming quite luxurious, this luxury hotel. And now they're reduced to being in the dark and the remnants of what happened after the earthquake. And so it's like, even though they're alluring and exciting, they still are gritty creatures who are just living in this rubble, which is what I found like really cool.
When Michael has sort of just been initiated into the gang and they take him back to the lair, and at the time, like, he just thinks these are just a bunch of typical juvenile delinquents, some angry punks, doing wild, crazy motorcycle stunts for kicks. But then they take him back to the lair and it's full of like all of these old relics and memorabilia from like the sunken hotel that you mentioned, and also like they've got pictures of older rock stars like Jim Morrison on the wall. And it just sort of it slowly hints that there's something more to them. Like the youngest member of their gang, this tag-along kid that they've got, is wearing like a Civil War era uniform, Southern American Civil War style jacket. And I mean, that's before they like offer him some Chinese takeaway that sort of magically transforms into worms. Like at least in his head, the noodles magically transform into worms.
And I think also, like, even though we as viewers know that they're vampires, it says it on the review, like the video, the DVD says it. It's interesting that it's obviously not obvious to Michael. Obviously, he doesn't know that they're vampires, but it's really good for us to see that those hints are there. And especially even with like the little kid who Star looks after, obviously being a kid vampire, it's there, it exists. But Michael just sees him as some punk kid hanging out with the cool older kids. Doesn't really think, oh yeah, I'm just gonna like drink this, I'm just gonna eat this stuff, and oh no, I'm a vampire. It's really cool.
Well, also we're watching this with the benefit of the internet, and a lot of the scenes from the Lost Boys becoming memes and being like proliferated on social media. But people watching this back in the 1980s would have come in with, more of a blank slate. I mean, yes, they would know that they're vampires, but there would be certain details that have been kept out of the press. And I think moments of visual foreshadowing, they serve a purpose not only in like hinting at the darker side of the characters, but also playing fair with the audience, so that when the full extent of their depraved natures are revealed. It doesn't seem like it comes out of nowhere. Like the audience has said, okay, the filmmakers played fair with us. We saw that, this was established earlier.
Even like when, later another line when it's established that like, Max is the head vampire and everything like that. Even though a lot of people now, like if we've watched it again and again, we know that there is a lot of interesting foreshadowing that like sometimes I guess that you can miss.
Well, that's right. Diane Weist's character gets a job working at a video store, and Edward Herrmann's character Max is her boss. And he just seems like this ordinary middle-aged man. But you notice that you never really see him around during the day. He's oddly insistent on being invited inside, and, animals don't seem to like him very much.
Yeah.
I mean, you look back on it now and you see, it's kind of obvious, but the first time I saw it, I didn't spot it.
But, I didn't either.
But when it was revealed, I thought, no, the filmmakers played fair with me. There was enough foreshadowing there that it didn't seem to just come out of nowhere.
I think also, like with the dog, Nanook, as like obviously he hangs him. So, and part of me thinks, okay, you should always trust the animals. You should always trust that the animals know these things about people. They know everything about, the secret lives of people because they instinctively know this. And so when I was rewatching again, I'm like, oh yeah, obviously Nanook hated him. So I should have, I guess, suspected him. But he's so ordinary as well. And I think that the ordinary man, the ordinary boyfriend of the mum is very unsuspecting. But then maybe that's why we should have suspected, because he's so ordinary.
The banality of evil, it's sort of there embodied in that character. And you just mentioned another sort of trope that comes into play with the Lost Boys, which I just thought of, which is common in horror fiction of like when someone's a bad egg, all the animals, react with hostility towards them. I mean, it's also often a trope in sort of Gothic romance text as well. I mean, I'm just thinking of a lot of the stuff by the Bronte sisters, particularly Anne Bronte, where like, characters who, have a darker side or they're just bad people are really unkind to animals. And they tend to like sense there's something up with them. That's not something that always applies in real life, but it's something that often crops up in fiction.
It does, and I think also because it comes up in fiction and a lot of like films and TV shows and things like that to warn people and to be like, well, there must be something innately wrong about this person or something innately bad, because if an animal can suspect it, then it exists. Whereas us humans, as mortals, don't always know those things about people and can't always tell.
What you mentioned about the visual foreshadowing, just to pick up on that, I mean, it's just part and parcel of, I think, how well crafted the film is from a technical point of view. The film was, as I mentioned before, directed by Joel Schumacher. The cinematographer was a man named Michael Chapman. And, I mean, they're both sadly no longer with us, but they were sort of masters of their craft. And you can see that the shot composition in this, they know when to sort of pull back and like establish the sort of character of the landscape, but also when to zoom in and focus on the like intimate family drama and relationships that develop over the course of the film. Joel Schumacher's probably best known for two films he made that, I don't know, are widely hated. In the 90s, he made a couple of Batman films, Batman Forever and Batman and Robin, which DC Comics readers tend to dislike because they have a very campy approach to the Caped Crusader. And Broadway musical enthusiasts tend to be leery of his 2004 film of Phantom of the Opera for basically prioritizing visual razzle-dazzle over musical substance. However, the atypical of the work that he did over the course of his career, most of the films he made were dark crime thrillers, such as Falling Down, Phone Booth, The Client, and A Time to Kill. And he made a what I think is a very underrated medical horror film called Flatliners, which I found genuinely harrowing at times. Michael Chapman, the cinematographer, had a very sort of patchy career as well. I mean, he started out as a camera operator on some classic films like The Godfather and Jaws, and then was a cinematographer in a lot of other classic films like Taxi Driver and Raging Bull and The Wanderers, and tried to make a move into directing with a sports film called All the Right Moves. But his second film as a director, Clan of the Cave Bear, was an infamous flop. It was hated by fans of the best-selling novel that it was based upon. It was hated by, critics and the general public as well. I honestly don't think it's all that bad. But The Lost Boys was the first film he made after deciding, well, my directorial career is over. I better stick to cinematography. And he probably had a lot to prove in terms of proving that, like, he still could deliver the goods. He was still worth employing.
Well, I think he definitely achieved that, because the cinematography in it is such a crucial role of setting the tone and like the atmosphere and the menacing aspect of it. Because, as I mentioned, it's in this fun say, there's all these exciting things, but there is still this menacing creepiness about it. He uses a lot of like dark lighting against the brightness of the fair. There's a lot of like shadows, and even using the abandoned luxury hotel, being sunken within the cliff, it makes like this eerie and strange kind of place. Like, it seems like he's very good at making the I don't know, normal things abnormal. Also, like, I think with cinematography, what I was going to mention is the camera movements, especially when there's the motorcycle chase. So it moves kind of follows Michael and his point of view, and I really liked that aspect of it, because it moves from Michael to other people's faces. So it goes from him and then to Star when she's looking behind, and I think that's a really good use of cinematography and a really good use of making movements and pulling you into the actual thing. So I think that's really cool.
I think another vital component of establishing the mood in the film, in addition to the cinematography, was the music.
I love it. I think the Lost Boys soundtrack is one of my favorite soundtracks. I love the music. Music for me is a really big part of film, and it's a really big part of whether I like a film or love a film, because obviously music can create it's its own character. It can create something so much bigger than just a general score. I think one of the parts that it makes it such a classic is it has so many iconic songs that are, do bring us a nostalgia, but they were really popular then, really good then, and they're still so popular now. Like, I guess if, Cry Little Sister, that's, goes throughout the film constantly. What was his name?
Jared McCann, I think, was the singer. And I believe, I like the way that song sort of, it alternates between his sort of very deep, dark voice and there's sort of passages for children's choir. There's another sort of, there's a cover of the Easy Beat song Good Times by In Excess and Jimmy Barnes on the soundtrack. Mm-hmm. It conveys the sort of reckless hedonism of the gang, the Lost Boys, I think, very well. And I guess what we should mention, one of the things that's been the source of memes and jokes about the film was Tim Capello, who not only appears on the soundtrack singing a cover of I Still Believe, but also appears in the film, which is set in a small coastal town where there's a sort of carnival set up by the dockside. And he performs the song in the film shirtless. He has a bodybuilder's physique. People often refer to him as just the shirtless saxophone guy in this movie.
No, he's the oiled up sexy sax man. Say that 5 times really fast. Oiled up sexy sax man.
Oiled up sexy sax man.
You can't even say it.
Sexy sax man.
Oiled up sexy sax man. But I feel like he's a character in himself.
Well, I don't know much about his solo career. I mean, I've heard him as like a guest artist on like other 80s albums by Peter Gabriel and Tina Turner and David Bowie. I don't know much about him, to be honest. I like the energy he brings to his performance. And, like, you see all of these, you often see it in a film where, like, someone is giving a live performance, supposedly, and the crowd is, like, really stoked. And you think, oh, come on, there's no way anyone would be really that stoked to see this, and they're obviously being paid. But I believed it because, like, he was just so energetic in his performance, and I could believe that the crowd was into it if they were depicted in the film.
I was reading. Did he work with just like Tina Turner?
He worked with her on the song Typical Male, also We Don't Need Another Hero, the theme song from Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome.
Yeah.
He did most of the saxophone parts on Peter Gabriel's second solo album, which is, being a big Peter Gabriel fan myself, that's mostly how I know him. He's probably done lots of other things that I just haven't bothered to research yet.
I think it just made me think of it because it was such a that sort of era. Tina Turner, kind of big hair, 1980s saxophone. He really embodied that. And, as the old-up sexy saxophone player, but he really had that kind of, what is the word? I don't know. He just had this kind of energy about him that I think was really of that time and really of, like, someone who would wear all those silver and gold bulky jewelry, maybe, like, leopard prints, like, really tight jeans, and that also, I think, added a lot of humor and stuff to the movie itself. So what I mean, like his embodiment of it, like he had this little flair to the movie. I feel like, and I can't imagine The Lost Boys without him in it. Like, he's his own character. I feel like it.
Well, that's the thing. Speaking of 80s fashion, and of course, there's all kinds of, like, very 80s, like, jackets and mullets on display here. But I think this film, in a way, the flashy decadence of the 80s as a decade, which is something that is often sort of, derided, is something that sort of plays into the attitude of the main characters. Their wild hedonism. Like, it seems to be of the time. And, like, all of these elements, these stylistic elements, I think are fitting for characters such as this.
Yeah.
Like, they naturally seem a part of this world, even with their supernatural powers.
Well, they have, all the all black kind of clothing, the new romantic kind of style of the 80s. The hair, you think of, David, like Kiefer Sutherland having, that mullet that he has. It's just so iconic of the 80s, I think. And something that David Bowie, I guess you'd have, even, Rod Stewart, a favorite of my mom. He even had that. Just bleached blonde kind of things seem to be of the 80s, long curly hair and all the jewelry, I think. And especially, I think, the leathers and the motorbikes. Those things are like, it's like a counterculture, kind of staple counterculture of that time. And it's so chaotic, but it's such a nod to, I guess, the rebelliousness of that time period as well, I think. But the thing is, yes, there's vampires, right? But wouldn't it be so hot there? So it's like California, right? In the middle of the summer. Do they feel it? Or are they just like they don't feel it because they're dead, right? They're vampires. So they can afford to be decked out in all leather and all black and stuff like that.
I think with a lot of youth culture, like, the practicality of it is sort of secondary to the style. You're making a fashion statement. You're not really, interested in whether it's practical for the weather.
But I guess one of the things I liked is that they're designed to be, like, alluring and seductive, I think. Just, because they have this cool aspect to it. So even with Michael, he sees his vampires, they're dressed in all this exciting, cool clothes, that they're obviously a counterculture, obviously completely atypical from the colourful outfits everyone else is wearing when they're going rollerblading down the boardwalk. And it's such a, you kind of, the eyeliner rimmed eyes. I think it's also such a cool departure from the whole Dracula aspect of vampirism. It's not just capes and things like that. It's just this really cool punk edge thing that I think is just really cool. And it added a really cool element to the characters of being fun and being, again, the party all night, sleep all day thing. They're a fun group of vampires who, I guess they kill people, I guess.
Well, that's sort of the question that comes up of like, would you want to be a vampire? I mean, there's so many perks, like not, growing old, not dying. I mean, think of all the things you could see, the places you could go. If you could just buy time, you have, I mean, if I were immortal, like I could, do all kinds of things. I'd have time to like study law, medicine, travel the world. I wouldn't just be like a jack of all trades. I'd be like a master of all trades because I'd have time to, study everything and be supremely knowledgeable about everything. But there's the thing, I would have to be, part-time serial killer.
But you couldn't.
That's like the downside to all this power and, all this opportunity is it comes at the price that you'd have to be a serial murderer. And this isn't one of those films that sort of I was going to say, this isn't one of those films like Twilight that presents like sucking animal blood as an option.
Yeah.
I think it's pretty clear it has to be like human blood for it to work.
Yeah. And I guess it's different also. So from, interview with the vampire, where Louis has the option and like he feeds off rats, right? And Lestat is sort of like, you're a vampire, you should feed off humans. That's what you do. That's within your nature. Where, and then you've got like True Blood, the book and film series, a show as well. And they drink off True Blood, which is a drink like that is created for vampires. So there are these other alternatives in other films and stuff like that, where with the Lost Boys, it's like, it's blood. You're a murderer, like you're a killer. This is what you have to do. And then suddenly the cool clothing, the cool fun, motorcycle trips, scaring people. Suddenly that's not so cool, especially to Michael, I think.
I think the other interesting thing about the Lost Boys is the implication that being turned into a vampire leaves you in a state of arrested development mentally. Like it freezes you in time, not just physically, but mentally. The title, of course, is an allusion to the like immortal children of Peter Pan.
Mm.
But the thing is, like, these teenagers, they're made into vampires. They start out as a bunch of angry punks and are basically stuck that way. It's not like it's an Interview with the Vampire, where the character of Claudia is transformed into a vampire as a child, but continues to mature mentally. And the whole tragedy of her existence is that she's a woman in her mind, but she's stuck in the body of a child and can't know all the joys of womanhood. Whereas with the Lost Boys, it's much more a case of, okay, when you're a vampire, you're not just stuck at the physical age that you were when you were turned. You're also in that headspace.
Mm-hmm.
And that is something that's sort of, like, I guess, continued on with stuff like the Vampire Diaries and Twilight, where, like, the main characters just keep repeating high school because they don't have sort of the mental capacity to sort of retain, like, facts and information, and they keep, they remain stuck as teenagers in a sort of mental sense as well. Although, that's the thing. I think I prefer the Lost Boys approach. Like, if you're going to stay a teenager, like, forever, like be an angry punk, not a mopey emo boy.
I think that's what's a really cool thing is that the differences with, being someone moping around, just being completely weird like Edward Cullen is. But I guess it's, that they're cool. They, I guess it's sort of, there's still that element of struggling with identity as well, growing up. And it's, Michael is getting sort of, seduced by these people, like by David. He wants to become one of them, like he wants to become part of them because obviously he feels like an outsider. I think even before that they moved there, just from what I can get, he must have already felt like an outsider. But there is that whole teenage thing going on of feeling moody. He's just attracted to, I think also that the tension. I think maybe Michael gets attracted to the tension that's between him and David as well, of fighting to be, with Star, fighting to be the alpha male. And I think that is also that teenage kind of thing, that adolescent thing of fighting to be the bigger man, I suppose. I don't know. It just seems like there is a lot of, bloodlust and then adolescence and then sexuality and everything is sort of culminating into one thing.
I think the sort of genuinely scary parts of this film are not, and this might sound weird, because of course, I don't condone murder. And, it's not so much the scenes of the Lost Boys killing innocent people that disturb me the most. The scenes that I found sort of genuinely frightening were more the parts where Mike is sort of metamorphizing into a vampire and trying to fight this process of metamorphosis. And this is happening, at the same time as he's a teenager and he's, dealing with the raging hormones of that condition. And he's, dealing with this sort of crush that he has on Star, who's sort of like the groupie of the motorcycle gang, and maybe something much deeper and older than that. It's those moments where sort of he's struggling to not only reconcile with his sense of identity, but, his humanity, his struggling to retain his humanity. I thought that was some of the most creepy and unsettling moments in this film.
A lot of, I think their transformation into what they actually visually look like as vampires is pretty scary. Like it's not just someone who has fangs. It's not just, dirty and gross. It is entire face transformation, and which does make it more of a scary kind of aspect to it. Because it's not like, back to Twilight, you're sparkling, I'm a hideous killer, Bella. It's your face is disfigured. It is creepy. And yeah, it doesn't have that beauty aspect like Anne Rice. Again, it is creepy. And it actually makes me think of Buffy. So Buffy the Vampire Slayer. One of my all-time favorite TV shows. I think it's interesting that both the Joss Whedon vampires as well in Lost Boys are very similar. Their face is similar, the way that they change is similar, the physiognomy is similar. So yeah, I didn't actually realize that until recently, where I was like, they've actually taken a similar kind of style to making their vampires scary, like their physical characteristics. I don't know if you could think of something else that has similar vampires, like the facial construction, I guess.
The Lost Boys came out the same year as another movie called Near Dark, another vampire movie. It was kind of like I guess you could say a vampire western, though it was set in the present day. It was directed by Catherine Bigelow, probably best known for making Point Break, Blue Steel, and The Hurt Locker. It had a soundtrack by Tangerine Dream, had I think it had Bill Paxton, Lance Henriksen, and Jenny Wright in the cast. It was an interesting film that sort of, it had the misfortune to come out the same year as The Lost Boys, and it was sort of, the one that lost at the box office. Although it has a huge cult following to this day. But yes, it has that same kind of, the vampires have this sort of animal quality. Yeah, they're really vicious. And yeah, that's a sort of similar thing. I mean, there's many other examples I could probably think of that, go for that sort of animalistic depiction of vampirism.
It actually, yeah, it actually made me think of werewolves. Strangely enough, completely different, but it made me think of werewolves because it is such a animalistic kind of transformation. And even though it's just like, the face and things like that, it's still something that is it's very inhuman. The characteristics of the face are very inhuman. So like just thinking of like, how does it go? The brows go like down, like inwards. They're, so their eyebrows are more pronounced. Their bone structure's more pronounced. Their entire face becomes more long. Like the jaws are like, everything is longer, languid, and so angry. I don't know how to describe it, but it's more animalistic. It's more like a jaw that is like an animal, like a wolf. Getting very different from just other vampires and other mill films and things like that.
Well, we've gone into detail about the sort of fashion aesthetics of the various cliques, as well as their sort of physical characteristics. I think before we leave off this podcast, we should get into detail about the ensemble cast and just sort of how well chosen they were for their parts, because I do feel that the magnetism of the various actors they got for this movie has a great deal to do with its success as well.
Yeah. I think so as well. Obviously, I was going to say, do you know the name of the guy who plays the grandpa? What is his name? Bernard something.
Barnard Hughes is his name.
Okay, Barnard Hughes. Yeah. All right, well, Barnard Hughes as grandpa, he is someone who stands out to me as a character himself. He seems like even just a caricature in a way of an eccentric grandpa. He's so eccentric, and I think he played the role so well. Like, I actually haven't seen him in anything else, so that's why I don't really know a lot about him and his other roles, if any. Obviously, he probably does. I just don't know. But I thought
I believe he was known for a sitcom called Doc, and he's had character parts in a couple of other things, Midnight Cowboy, Tron, those things that pop into my mind. Anyway.
Well, I was going to say, like, he's so eccentric. Another thing that highlights that there's so obviously vampires in the town is the grandpa. And even though he says it and everything, he's like, he's all mysterious. You've got to be careful or everything like this. But I think he's also a character that I love because he can't be too of a caricature. I think they could have made him too realistic, like too unrealistic, too fantastical. But I think they just cut it short and they rein him in so he's not so ridiculous. He is still the weird grandpa where you're like, whatever, grandpa, you go, you have your beer, you reminisce about times and whatever. But he's funny and he's just very entertaining. I think the actor himself playing the grandpa is so entertaining.
He gets some of the best jokes anyway in this movie. I like the final scene at the end where it's revealed that he knew the whole time that vampires existed and that they were living in this town, and he didn't he didn't think to tell his daughter and his grandchildren when they moved in about all of this. But he's very picky about certain aspects of his routine being followed, and like telling his grandchildren that the TV guide is delivered on this day or whatever, and he's very picky about all this, but he doesn't think to mention this one important detail about life in this new town that they've moved into until the very end, after some vampires have laid siege to his house and he's killed them by driving a pickup truck with spikes on the front into the vampire to make sure it's well staked. But But yeah, like the final line he gets in the movie is like, yeah, the one thing I can't stand about this town is all the vampires.
But if you read the TV guide, you don't need to watch the TV. So I guess that's why he is, he finds that more important and more interesting than living in a coven of vampires. I do think a Diane Weist as Lucy, as the mum, is amazing.
It's Diane Weist, not Weist. Okay.
Or maybe it's Weist.
Oh, okay. I don't know.
It's probably Weist. It's probably Weist.
Knowing me, I've probably got the pronunciation wrong. Anyway,
it's probably Weist. I think her as the mum is amazing. I have really admired her in a lot of different films. I think she is someone she makes me think of like a quiet achiever at school. Do you know what I mean? Someone who does their best work and they keep doing their best work. They're so good. And I feel like she's someone who is always good in everything that she does. And she's so mild-mannered and she's so, I don't know, soft. But the thing is, I remember her saying, like, someone asked her in the past about, you're always playing these similar characters, softly smoking mum, mildly mannered. And she mentioned, she's just like, I can be other things. She's like, I'm not always nice. That's just how I'm cast. But, yeah, she's great.
Well, I think what you're trying to say is that she's a consummate character actress in the sense that she inhabits a character. She does her thing without drawing too much attention to herself. And unlike a lot of, I think it was Michael Caine who said, like, the difference between an actor and a movie star is an actor they're handed a script and they think, right, how can I change myself to suit this character? Whereas a movie star gets handed a script and thinks, oh, how can I change this character to suit me? But yes, Diane Weist is an actress first and foremost. And I know her from, as you say, playing a lot of put upon mums. Edward Scissorhands springs to mind as a sort of classic example in the fantasy genre where she's a mum doing her best, but the circumstances are very difficult and peculiar. I also remember her in one role where she did get to be a bit snappish, was the HBO TV series In Treatment, where Gabriel Byrne played a very dysfunctional psychologist, and he ends up going to see another psychologist played by Diane Weist to deal with his problems. And and like, he's such a hopeless case that she eventually just says, I can't handle your bullshit anymore. You're beyond my help.
So obviously, like I've seen that as well. And it took me a while. Like, when I had to think back, and I'm like, I know I've seen her in that, and then I remembered that she was in that. But the thing is, her saying you're a lost cause, it can't help you. She says things in such a polite way. She says it in such a way that, you know what, it could be passive aggressive. I don't know. I feel he's railing at this. She's like, oh, you're lost for. But she says things so plainly, I think, if that's the kind of way to say things. And I think I just really like her in The Lost Boys because she's so in The Lost Boys, I feel like she isn't so quiet and subtle. Her character is so big. Like, she is so, she did like most scenes and everything. She's just there. She's just, she's just a recent divorcee looking for a fresh start. That's all I want. Why do you kids go and annoy me? Can't I just go on a date with Max, this lovely guy from the video store? And I think she just plays it so well. Like, because she, she's worried about her kids. She's worried about starting a new relationship with Max. She's worried about, what the divorce means to them. She thinks Michael, being a vampire is just him going through the motions and
going through a phase.
It's just him going through a phase, and that's what she says. And she's, to Sam, like Corey Haim, she's just like, he's you're reading too. What is it about comics? You're reading too many horror comics or something like that. Stop reading that. It's all in your head. It's all in imagination. But yeah, she says it in such a polite way. She comes across as such a genuine mother. And I think in so many other films that she's in, she comes across as so genuine and then therefore real. So I think she's great.
Yeah, I guess as a mother yourself, you would appreciate how, like, sympathetically this film depicts, like, a single parent. And it's probably quite progressive in that sense. You mentioned the Corey and his comic book obsession and how basically it's the two kids who work at the local comic book store who are like the supreme authority on vampire hunting because they're the only ones sort of who take this sort of thing seriously. I thought like that's where a lot of the comedy in the movie comes from.
The Frog Brothers.
Those three kids, yeah.
Yeah.
But I felt it was like organically part of the movie, and I thought that the comic timing was really sharp.
You know, they're the they're the ones who kind of introduce them to the concept of vampires, which is not even subtle at all. It's like, you should read this. Don't read that. Read this. And they make me think of even like, you think of like a lot of Stephen King books, like Stephen King movies, how all the kids of like, you know, a ragtag gang, and they're off on their adventures, and
like it.
Yeah. And they made me think of that in a way, like, to make me think of it that they know everything the adults don't. They're the ones you should trust. They're the ones, like they're in the know. Don't trust adults. Don't trust anything like that. And they, well, they're right anyway. And everything that they say is true. And, I don't know. It just, I think also Corey Feldman, he makes me think of sort of like a young Rambo. You know what I mean? With the red kind of, yeah, the red vendetta, and the way that he talks so quietly, like, you should read this, you should be on edge. I think he does embody a kind of like Rambo style person with, you know, camo shirt and everything like that. I think he's really good at it as well. He's awesome.
I guess as a woman, Claire,
yes,
you might be better qualified than me to address the issue of how well Jason Patric and Kiefer Sutherland live up to the smouldering bad boy, like how well they do at project smouldering bad boy appeal that the characters are supposed to have.
Well,
I thought they did great, but
well, is it next week or the week after? I'm 33. Well, sometime soonish, I'm 33, but I still watch this and think, that smoldering and interested. That I'm like, is that bad of me? No. But I think that they reach that kind of charismatic sexiness to them in a way that is really enthralling and appealing. And I think, I don't know what I'm saying. I think they play it really well. I think that they, as I mentioned earlier, the allure of them, they're suspicious. They're kind of like, you just want to know more about them. They're alluring. They're enticing. Everything that a vampire should be. They're just, you know, fucking this adolescent kind of struggle of sexual identity and, you know, learning more about themselves. But I definitely think they're very attractive. And I think I would be like Star and get on the back of the motorbike, but perhaps wear a helmet. I think maybe wear a helmet.
Well, yes, Jamie Gertz is the I was gonna say sort of like the groupie, the tag along girl for the Lost Boys gang, and Jamie Gertz doesn't get a lot to do in this. I've seen her in other roles where she had, I guess, more dialogue. There's another 80s film that's sort of borderline fantasy called Crossroads with Ralph Macchio, which I hope we can do as the subject of a later podcast episode. Because, that's a really great film where she plays a teenage runaway and there's more nuance to her character. In this, she's sort of like the object of desire caught between like the seasoned vampire that Kiefer Sutherland plays and the sort of I don't know, fledgling wannabe vampire that Jason Patric plays.
Yeah.
But she does project this kind of otherworldly allure that makes you understand like why they'd be, drawn into her orbit. And why Jason Patric would be so eager to get into her pants, even though he's only known her for a few days. I mean, I believe.
Well, but one of the things, yes, I can criticize her character a lot, but like we don't really know about anything about her. I mean, you can suspect that like you can speculate that maybe she's like a runaway or something, and she met David, and she fell in with the crowd of the Lost Boys. But yeah, we just don't know anything about her, so
I think that
mysterious,
I think there's a place for like mystery and allure, and that might be be the root of the attraction. She wasn't given a lot to work with, and she made the best with what she had. Honestly, what I think. Yeah. I feel I should say something serious about the two leading men in this film, because I've only just, made some flippant remarks about their sex appeal. I feel that Kiefer Sutherland actually does a good balancing act in this movie of being, charming and menacing. Sometimes within the space of a single scene, it's like a switch flips.
Yeah.
And I think that's very good acting right there. As for Jason Patric, I like the fact that the way he portrays, I guess someone on the verge of manhood who is tempted by evil, but still has some moral compass. You get the sense that even though he makes some poor lifestyle choices, he still does care about his family deep down. And you see that sort of natural chemistry that he has with Diane Weiss and Corey Haim.
I think he's really good. Like I don't know a lot about him as an actor. I think I only have seen him in that, or if I've seen him in other things that I don't recall. But I think I think he does a really good job. I think he does a good job at being just a teenage boy, having like an annoying kid brother, and being someone who really wants to, fit in with others as well. And he really wants to fit in with the gang, I guess, of the Lost Boys. And, he's going through his own kind of problems, I think. But yeah, I think he is a really solid character. You know what I mean?
Jason Patric, the actor, has sort of, after the success of this movie, he kind of, I guess, shunned a lot of mainstream Hollywood roles and went for a lot of like parts in borderline art house kind of cinema. The three films I remember him from most distinctly, which I feel are all very underrated, and he's very good in them. There's one called The Beast. It's released in some countries as The Beast of War. It's about the Russian invasion of Afghanistan, and it focuses on a tank crew. And Jason Patric is a sort of conflicted soldier who ends up sort of briefly defecting to the Afghan rebel side. There's a film called The Journey of August King, which is set in sort of pre-Civil War America, and he's a man who helps a runaway slave to escape.
Mm-hmm.
And the final one that I've seen, this is another really underrated film called Geronimo, an American Legend, from the mid-90s. And that focuses on sort of the last years of Geronimo's life. He's played by Wes Studi, and Patrick is one of the soldiers tasked with tracking him down. Again, he plays a character who's very conflicted because he has a sort of begrudging respect for Geronimo's sense of honor and the plight of his people as well.
I was just thinking something, and I'm like, hang on, I have seen him in something, and now I feel like a complete idiot because I'm pretty sure he's in Frankenstein Unbound, which was 90-something, 90, 91, 90, 90? I don't know.
Yes.
Pretty sure he is, yeah, as Lord Byron.
And didn't that film also have Michael Hutchence as Percy Shelley?
It did. Yeah, I remember watching that such a long time ago. Yeah, that's the only thing that I've seen him in. But I can't recall seeing him in anything else because I don't know. Yeah, I think I just saw him in that as Lord Byron, but nothing else, which is interesting because I think that he is a really good actor. I think that he is someone who has a very commanding presence. You know what I mean? Like you just want to look at him. I think I don't know. I just think he
has this odd physical resemblance to a young Marlon Brando as well in certain shots, which I think adds like I don't know, the biker mystique that the characters are supposed to have. I mean, one of Brando's most famous roles was the Wild One, as a sort of rap biker character.
And he just looks cool. You know, he just looks like a cool person, and he looks like someone who you would want to hang out with. You know, and he's all moody and edgy, whatever. But he, I think he does a very good job of playing a character who is someone who's just moved. His friend's had a divorce. He's living somewhere he doesn't want to live. He's, moody, grumpy. So there's an annoying kid brother who just keeps telling him, we know you're vampires. He's like, oh, go away. But he does that really well. I think he really embodies the character of this moody teen who is falling in with the wrong crowd, and his mum and his mum's new boyfriend is annoying, and why do they have to have dinner with you know? I think it's like, oh, I'm dinner with you. Yeah, I think he does a really good job. Yeah, at it.
I have to, to close things up, yes, I think that's part of the Lost Boys appeal, is that, yes, you have these characters dealing with these sort of peculiar supernatural horrors, but at the same time, they're dealing with all the usual petty family squabbles and, first world problems of, living in, a small town in America. It's sort of, I don't know, it's sort of, they feed into each other in ways that are very interesting for both drama and comedy.
Yeah. And yeah, I think it's sort of, it's about family life and, I don't know, I think it's about family life. I think it's about growing up. I think it's about learning new things about yourself, about, going through puberty. It's also a kind of rebellion, a rebellion against the norm, a rebellion against society, a rebellion against your annoying mum and her weird, freaky dad. Yeah, and I think it's just a really fun movie that has so many awesome elements of it. Like, as you mentioned, the set design, the music, the actors. It's just really fun. It's just a really fun movie.
Overall, this, I think, we can chalk this up as a movie that stands the test of time. It holds up as a, bloody good piece of entertainment. Yeah. There's more to the enduring appeal of this movie than just nostalgia, I think.
Yeah, I think so. And it's something I'll continue to watch again and again, which is what I do almost every year. And I think it's...
As will I.
Yeah. And I think the fact that that's what people do, people still do it, means that it is a testament to what the original idea was of a fun, cool vampire movie that it doesn't take itself too seriously, has a sexy saxophone player, sexy vampires, a weird grandpa and his weird little jalopy. I don't know. Yeah. So it's really cool.
That's all for this week, folks. Thanks for listening. If you like what we're doing, please consider subscribing and sharing this podcast with your friends. If you have any questions or would like to provide suggestions for future episodes, you can send an email to fantasypodcastfeedback@gmail.com. Until next time, cheers.